So I will read this verbatim. By passing Proposition 204, the citizens of Arizona voted to expand access coverage to 115,000 childless adults. Through the expansion of Medicaid by the state legislature in 2013, 14,000 have been added to the Medicaid expanded program as of April 1st, 2014. Would you support maintaining health care coverage for these additional recipients, and why? And I'll start with Al.
Well, as I said before, Medicaid expansion that was passed in the legislative session prior to this one was a major mistake. Half of the states have turned Medicaid expansion down. In my view, when this was passed, not unlike Obamacare, in the middle of the night, looking at 1.5 billion a year coming into the state each year for 3 years, I sum it up in one word, and that word is greed. It was the greed of hospitals and insurance companies. What they don't tell you is that 50 cents of the federal dollar is borrowed from the Chinese and from future generations of Americans who haven't been born yet. This is immoral, unethical, and it's wrong, and we need to stop it. Again, I urge everyone to look at these upcoming elections, the primary and the general, especially at the legislative level, and see who voted for Medicaid expansion and who didn't, who is opposed to it and wants to stop it, because legislative races are going to be funded. Watch where the money comes from. The hospitals, the insurance companies are funding those candidates who voted for Medicaid expansion. It must stop. But so where will it end? 300,000, 400,000, 500,000. Any proposition passed by the voters that involves money, I believe, needs to have an expiry date of 5 to 8 years where the voters can re-vote it, and that includes this area of childless adults and Medicaid. Thank you.
Here. One of the reasons I don't is because it put the state in a very, very bad position, especially our governor in a bad position. I do support and did support the governor, I almost said the governor Napolitano. Don't support her at all. Governor Brewer in her very, very difficult decision to do what I believe is best for the state. The reality is, the question, we're taking it right, we're different than other states. We have a voter mandate that says what level of people we have to cover. The legislature went below that level. And even the most ardent opponents of Medicaid restoration, Medicaid expansion, admit that had we gone on our own, we would have wiped out all of the rainy day fund, all of the reserves, and we would have been in a much worse position had we done that. The governor understood that. She didn't like to make that decision, but there was a gun in her head. There was a gun in Arizona. That's one reason why I don't like Obama. But guess what? We have laws. And we have one law which was voted on by the citizens of Arizona. And I actually believe that if the citizens of Arizona make a law, or if the legislature makes a law, we should comply with that law. We also have a federal law. And that puts us in an unusual position. The governor did what she believed was right for Arizona. I believe long-term it was right for Arizona. The next governor will have to deal with this issue again. We don't know what will happen in 2.5, 3 years. We will have to deal with that. I'm ready and willing to deal with it and make a decision that's in your best interest, especially a rural hospital. Those at most risk by lack of coverage are rural hospitals. Those most at risk from unfunded care are rural hospitals. And the fact is that what we've done, I support. I will continue to support. And as governor, though, I will be ready to deal with that issue that will come up in 2.5 years and deal with it in a way that's in the best interest of the citizens of Arizona.
Well, I absolutely do not support the expansion of Medicaid from the eligibility for Medicaid from 100% of the federal poverty level to 138%. The writing's on the wall. You can see the program will grow into yet another entitlement program. And the real problem, of course, with the entitlement programs is they build dependency on government. They lead to the constant expansion of government. And there's a direct correlation between dependency on government and the loss of personal responsibility and individual liberty in our country. When I served in Congress, we worked to make Medicaid a block grant to the states, respecting the 10th Amendment, respecting state rights, understanding the concept of federalism, and again, driving your federal taxpayer dollars down to the state and local level where they can best be designed and delivered to the people who most need those programs. Of course, we all support Medicaid. It's part of the social safety net. We need to have a program for indigent health care to serve the truly needy and the desperately poor, but not yet another growing, ever-expanding entitlement program. I said earlier, by the way, that Medicaid expansion and Obamacare raised $1 trillion from Medicare over the next decade. That's not coming from me, by the way. That's coming from Medicare, the Office of the Actuary in Medicare. And you know what they say? At the end of that decade and the rerouting or raid of $1 trillion from Medicare to Medicaid, the physician reimbursement rates under Medicaid will be higher than they will be under Medicare. That's not sustainable. That's wrong. I will fight to make sure that Medicaid, that we seek a waiver from the federal government so that we can design and implement indigent health care here in Arizona. And oh, by the way, one other provision of Obamacare that's gone by the wayside, there's actually supposed to be a block grant program here to provide incentives to employers who offer health and wellness programs that emphasize good diet, exercise, and healthy lifestyle habits. That, like so many other provisions of Obamacare, has been put on the shelf, and that's a mistake.
I have supported the Medicaid expansion bill the way it was done and the way it was crafted. I especially would not have, as a Republican governor, got 4 or 5 in the House and Senate to run over the rest of the leadership and the majority of the Republican legislators.
Thank you.
Now, the voters of Arizona did say that a certain group of people should be covered, and as it has been said here, I think Scott said it amongst others, we should honor that statement by Arizona voters that they should be covered. But as he also mentioned, when you have a state mandate and a conflict at the federal level, what do? Well, as your Secretary of State, we had almost a similar conflict where the state of Arizona voters 10 years ago said that in order to vote and participate in Arizona elections, you should have to prove citizenship in order to register to vote. Then the federal courts came in and said, for federal races, and if a person registers to vote using a special federal form, they don't have to show proof of citizenship. Well, we as election officials were caught between 2 conflicting decisions. And Kansas was in the same situation, so Arizona and Kansas, under my leadership and the secretary there in Kansas, we sued the federal government several months ago, and we were happy that about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we won in the federal district court in Kansas, and I believe we are back to a path now where we will be able to require proof of citizenship when people register to vote, whether they're using the federal form or whether they're using a state form. So it takes courage to stand up to the federal government, whether it's in Medicaid, Medicare, Medicaid expansion, or voting rights, but we need to control our destiny more here in Arizona than they do.
I'm 100% opposed to Obamacare. It's a monumental failure and a rolling disaster. I believe that America's got to break out of Obamacare before Obamacare breaks America. I think Arizona can lead the way with the right choices here. I was not in favor of what happened with Medicaid. There's very specific reasons. Now, the legislature and the governor have done what they've done, but I stood opposed to it for 2 reasons. One, the cost to the state in the out years. I just told you where we were financially just a few short years ago. The federal government guarantees this for 3 years. And also the language in the circuit breaker, which supposedly gets us out of a situation if the federal government breaks its guarantee. Well, Ronald Reagan once said, be careful about getting in bed with the federal government.
That's right.
Sometimes you get a little something more than just a good night's sleep. And in 3 years, when the federal deficit explodes, the rules are going to change. Now, Arizona will take care of the destitute and disabled. That's what Medicaid exists for. But the next governor is going to have to deal with the restructuring of this, and who better than someone that manages $12.5 billion and demonstrates the ability to communicate and lead. And in addition to that, in 2016, our long national nightmare will be over. And we'll have a new president. And we'll be able to go to Washington, D.C. and get our dollars back and take charge of our social safety net here in Arizona, and I want to lead the way.
We pay for the buildings, whether or not anybody uses them. We pay for medical staff, whether or not anybody employs them. We pay for the supplies in these really nice buildings. If we made it, if you have a need, go get it. Go get it taken care of, because all of that is paid for. Why do we have to channel it through any individual? If we have the services available, the staff paid, and facilities paid for. Why? Who's running around making this, creating this huge expense? Well, there's a building over there. Well, I can't go to it because I haven't done this, that, and the other thing. And even when I go do this, that, and the other thing, I still have to go there and pay. It's paid for. What is a health exchange? Our medical doctor, since Obamacare turned over in October, when they flipped the switch on everyone, that 4 new banks have shown up. Is that what an exchange is? Is that what our health dollars? I still think, we mostly take care of our own health. It's medical that we need. And in any judicial, legislative action, language means everything. We had medical, Obama gave us health. If these health facilities are available, they're not being used to capacity even yet, that if we change our perspective, we wouldn't have to have all this paperwork, we wouldn't have to have all this, is there a facility available, are people hired? We have that. I still would like the exchange, what an exchange to be defined. And again, we received federal dollars in June 13th, 2013. Our legislature decided what we have now. So we have choices.
Christine.
The Medicaid expansion, let's get back to that. There are 7 categories of recipients of Medicaid benefits. The one we're talking about is childless adults. Should we cover childless adults? That was the question. The answer is, we are compassionate people. We're going to take care of people who have disabilities and who are not able-bodied. What I said at the time and what I would say now is, as it related to the Medicaid expansion debate specifically, is I would have done it differently if I had been the governor. First of all, I would not have called a special session under the cover of darkness and rolled over several members of my own party to force through a policy that clearly was not the wishes of the majority. The second thing is, and that's important to note, because if you really are going to make policy thoughtfully, you ought to do it with cooperation and with people who are in the majority party in agreement. And Senator Melvin, among the most vociferous of the people who opposed it and part of the lawsuit that's pursuing that. The second thing is, importantly, I would have said, let's put absolute limits on the number of days able-bodied people can be on this benefit. Let's put absolute limits on the number of Arizonans who can get the benefit. Now, we understand that we have to make an appeal to CMS, and this is a federal government decision, and this is a waiver issue, and I'm not naive, I understand all those qualifications, but if we are to provide benefits to indigent people, people who actually necessarily have to have this kind of coverage, let's get it to the people that need it. Let's tell people who are able-bodied, this safety net was never designed to be a lifetime benefit. Right. Not for income benefits and not for health care benefits. If you can get a job, you need to get a job. Right. Anybody in here ever carried 2 jobs? Why? Why did you have more than 1 job? Because you needed the money to make ends meet. That's what you do when you're an American. We can and should lead Arizonans to these kind of thoughtful solutions, and if you have this conversation openly, and you cheerlead for it, and you evangelize for it, and you get people focusing on good, you can actually make this kind of progress. Should we cover people who were childless adults like my husband and I if we became disabled? Yes. Should we cover us when we can get a job? No.